All right, everybody, welcome back to the Design, Build, Hunt podcast, which is presented by Whitetail Partners. Today, we are talking about Tim's early season success. Tim, it's good to have you back on the show. We talked a couple of weeks ago, had an episode about water holes that did really well, got a lot of traction, a lot of questions coming in about that. Specifically talking about your farm and a water hole that you put in. Then we had an episode with Sam a few weeks later talking about early season strategy and how to set up a good early season farm. And then you kill one of your target bucks on the opening day of Wisconsin's bow season. And so I thought, man, we've got to get you on right away. I have an episode ready to launch right now, but I was like, no, we've got to get Tim's episode out as soon as possible. So we had some back and forth, some issues. I got stuck on a property, was not able to record the day that we were supposed to, but we're finally here to talk about your buck. So, man, tell me a little bit first, just to tee it up, about where your farm is located and kind of the position that you hold there in the state.
Yeah, so we're Western Wisconsin. Farm country is what I describe it. If you think about like the driftless area in the southern part of the state where it's tons of bluffs along with that farm country, we're not quite that hilly, but still hills play a big part in it, ridges, systems like that, along with those ag fields. It's pretty traditional Western Wisconsin hunting setup.
Yeah, that I tell you what, if you want some big deer, Western Wisconsin is a good place to be.
It's underrated for sure.
Man, it's so underrated. And I tell folks this all the time, and maybe I shouldn't say this out loud. When you're thinking about a good public land hunt, like Wisconsin is so overlooked. And maybe it's just because it's hard to get to. So many folks are driving, they think about Illinois or Kentucky or obviously the coveted Iowa tag. But man, there's some really good hunting to be had in Western Wisconsin, Southwest Wisconsin, South Central Wisconsin. So lots going on there. But Tim, let's talk about your farm specifically. And would you classify that as a good early season farm?
I would say part of it is.
Okay.
There's kind of a couple different pieces to the farm as far as different habitats. And there's really one specific area which is happened to be where I was, typically plays best in the early season.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. And about how big?
We've got 60 acres.
60 acres. So yeah, we're not talking something that's gigantic and like out of the reach of a normal guy who's careful and wants to invest in a piece of property.
No. And it's that nice size where there's enough room to hunt, to move around, but 60 acres is very manageable. When you get into actually trying to implement a design, that'll keep you busy, but you can get it done.
Oh yeah, man. From a real estate and consulting perspective, I have clients come to me sometimes and they say, hey, I want 400 acres or I want 500 acres. And I say, well, who's going to be working on this property? Well, it's going to be me and I've got a buddy, or me and my sons are going to work on this. I'm like, you don't want 400 to 500 acres. You cannot manage, like you will have to leave a significant part of that property unmanaged if your goal is 400 to 500 acres. Realistically, like you're just not going to have the time to do it, and that's part of why we exist, right? So, but let's talk about this portion that is the better early season part of your farm. Sam and I talked a few weeks ago about the things that make a good early season farm, but I'm curious about the features that you say make this, at least portion of your property, a good early season hunt.
Yeah, I think that the biggest two things that play into it is that we have some good early food sources in that area. And then it's surrounded by some good, what I would consider early season, summer into early fall bedding. So you have number one, you have some grasses, some CRP on the neighboring properties around us that those deer like to bed in throughout the summer. We also have a couple of areas that we've set up as bedding areas, wooded areas, but they're a little more north-facing ridges. And so they're a little cooler. You get a lot of those south wind directions early in the season. And we'll talk more about that later, kind of how that played into this hunt. But it oftentimes is a good bedding area for those bucks when you have those south winds to be kind of on the north end of those ridge tops.
Right. And, in either constructing these bedding areas or thinking about what might be good early season bedding, are you building those out in the same way that you would like a bedding area that you're thinking for to be prime, like during the rut, or are you going about those a little different?
I'm not going to construct a bedding area to be a early season or a late season bedding area.
Okay.
Um, I'm not that specific, I guess. Maybe you are, Josh. But to me, it's more about creating the bedding areas and giving them the quality spaces throughout your property, and knowing that they're going to utilize those spaces differently at different points in the season. And so,
Right.
just having those options for the deer available so that they feel secure in multiple wind directions and multiple different times of the year on your property.
Yeah. So it's more about we put the good stuff on the landscape and then we let the deer tell us. Like that's
Yeah.
the hunting portion, right? We're letting the deer tell us what it is that they want, what it is that they need as they shift through the property during the year. What are some of those early season food sources that you're keying into on that part?
So there's some neighboring ag. So you've got your corn and your beans that are close by. But for us, as part of our food plot rotation here on our farm, the main food plot I was hunting over, there was half of it in peas, oats, and beans, and the other half we planted in the brassicas. Now I wouldn't consider the brassicas to be that early season draw. They're just adjacent, but that peas, oats, and beans is always really popular this time of year, and that's really where most of the deer were that night. It's funny, you have a field divided in half, and you could see there's like one or two deer on one side, and there's a whole pile on the other side where those peas, oats, and beans were.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about this buck just a little bit then, just
Yeah.
to kind of tee it up. Outstanding looking deer. I mean, looks fantastic. Kind of had some unique character. Is this the first year you had him on the farm, or is this one you've been watching?
Yeah, interestingly enough, first year we've seen him. I had thought maybe it had been a buck from a previous year that maybe it had an injury, something had happened. We were kind of trying to pair it up this year when we first got him on camera because we didn't have any history. But being that it was a pretty unique buck, after I got him, I kind of polled a couple of neighbors to see if they had been seeing him as well. And turns out that really only one neighbor had ever seen him at all, and it was one time last year, about a mile away. So where he came from exactly, we're not sure, but really consistently all through the early summer and then into the early fall. I mean, he's been on the property almost every day. So he moved in, set up his home range, and this is where he's been.
Wow. Is there anything in particular that you can point to and say, we think this might be what drew him here? Or was this just kind of a random luck kind of thing?
I don't want to call it luck because I think setting up a property in a way that a deer is going to find it and want to set up home range on it. There's some skill to that certainly, and some
Right.
luck as well. But I don't think I can point to one thing right now. I'm curious to watch as the rest of the season plays out, see if other deer move in, if it's a dynamic of holding space, and as you kill a deer last year, does that kind of open up a space for another one to move in? What kind of see how that plays out, but I couldn't tell you right now.
Right. So kind of the cumulative effect of the management that you've been doing on this property, not like one thing, which I think is important to point out. Like Tim didn't dig a water hole and now this buck moved onto the property.
Right.
Kind of there's not one thing that you can point to. It's a well-managed piece of property. One of
Yeah.
the questions I like to ask a lot of our guys, what would you say, like where would you say your property is at as far as full implementation being where you want it to be? Are we at 50%, 60, 70, 80%? What level would you say your farm is at?
That's funny you asked that because as you were, saying, is there one specific thing? I think part of having a property is it's always evolving. And
Mhm.
and we've owned this property now for I think 6 years. And I still think we're learning the property, right? You're always kind of figuring out new things. So the way that deer move in and out of the property, the way that, the number of deer can ebb and flow from year to year and how that changes things. And then also as you implement the plan. So there's all these dynamics that are constantly changing. I think if I had to put a number on it, and I don't think 100% is possible because there's always something else to do, I would say we're probably about 70% of the way there.
Okay. All right. That's pretty good. That's pretty
Yeah,
good.
yeah. Well,
Go
it
a long
helps
way.
to have a dad who's retired. You can send him out with your to-do list, and he gets a lot done in a hurry. So I've got
Oh
that.
yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, maybe he can come down and do the rest of my to-do list. If he can, maybe he can tag a buck soon and come on down to Georgia.
We'll
And
send him down.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Give him a few things to do once the weather turns nice here. So, all right, let's talk about this buck and maybe what you saw him doing throughout the summertime. Was he predictable or was it just kind of, hey, he's popping up all over the place?
Predictable in location. His movement patterns were pretty predictable as far as where we had some cameras located in this part of the property that I feel is kind of where he spent most of his time and was good summer habitat. You start to kind of key in on when am I getting pictures, what direction is the deer traveling, and then so what can I determine from that? And so when you start to see, all right, it's 5, 6, 7 in the morning and a deer is heading in a direction. Well, this time of year, we can assume he's not going to go another mile down the road. He's probably bedding somewhere close to there. So now we look out, and whether it's on my property or the adjacent properties, where are there spots that he might bed? And so you kind of start to get a picture of, okay, he's headed this way, he's probably bedded in this location or these locations. And or you get the opposite. He's coming out in the evening, it's 5 or 6 o'clock, and the direction of travel that he's coming from, let's work backward and figure out where he may have been before that, because again, we know he was probably pretty close to there at that point. So we had a pretty good idea of where he was. But the when he was going to show up day to day, there really wasn't a lot to that during the summer months. And I think that's not uncommon. And I don't get too worked up about that at that point in time. It's really once you get into the closer to the hunting season when you want to key in on specific times or conditions where you would expect to see that buck move through.
Right, right. So thinking about his personality, then you mentioned you polled the neighbors. Nobody had really had him other than maybe one guy. So do you think he was really a homebody at this point during the summer? I mean, you think he moved into your place and was like, "Hey, this is it"?
I do. I mean, the number of neighbors that we have with cameras, and we're pretty open and transparent with seeing pictures and or sending pictures to each other. And really, no one had been getting him, and I was really surprised by that. And even as I worked the property in the summer, I'd see him all the time. If I'm on the
Really?
tractor, yeah, it was amazing. I mean, he was really
Right.
set up in a tight area. He felt obviously very safe. And when I say I see him, I wasn't going through his bedding area, walking through and blowing him out, but you're working on the tractor and you see him across the field, a couple hundred yards away. He'd kind of watch you and then he'd walk off. But he was staying very tight to that area.
Wow. That I think that just goes to show. Do you know how old this buck was?
Best guess is 4.
Okay, best
But
guess.
without having any history, it's tough to say for sure.
Right, but I think that goes to show, or at least there's a little bit of evidence for, as these deer get older, it really seems like their ranges that they're covering are really going to shrink down. It's like they really dial in where they want to be, and
Yeah,
kind of figure that out. And then they did. I don't know. They're like me. I don't go far. As the
yeah,
older I get, the less far I want to go for my food and my bed.
yeah. You get
Uh,
lazy, and you also figure out, especially with deer, you figure out what made you safe to that point. Well, I'm going to keep doing that.
right.
Which is, I think, one of the interesting things with this deer, that it had a very tight home range, but clearly had shifted that range from prior years. And so that's probably the one piece of this puzzle I really haven't been able to put together. But once he settled in, like I mentioned, it was pretty tight.
Right. Did you get a really good idea of where you thought he was bedding? On either on your property or on an adjacent property?
Yeah, yeah, I did. And I mean, there's a million things that can change and go into a hunt. You can't just go out and say, "Hey, I know I'm going to kill this buck on this night." We can all call our shot though. And so you do that sometimes. And I told my wife before I left the house, I got a pretty good feeling that we might see him tonight. And that was really the testament to not only how we have the property set up, but I think a big key was starting to understand over the last few years, paying attention to what mature bucks, whether it's this one or different mature bucks that I've hunted, where are they bedding and where are they moving on certain wind conditions or certain weather conditions? And
Mhm.
that's been a big key for me with this particular area of the farm. Is I have these thick bedding areas off the north end of a field on these north facing slopes, and they tend to be used by mature bucks on south wind days. So if you can picture that wind coming up from their back from the south up over the top, they're able to smell everything behind them, and they're looking down these big ridges to the north. They can see everything in front of them. So it's that textbook setup of wind at the back, vision out the front for these deer. They feel very safe bedding there. And then what's great is from there, they can turn around then and walk back south into the wind as they feed into the wind, and they just feel very safe. They tend to be out in the daylight a little more when they have those certain weather conditions.
Right. That can make them really tough to hunt too. So I'm
Yeah.
curious to hear about the setup. So I mean, you're basically going to be hunting him when he thinks the wind is in his favor from the time he gets out of bed until he enters the field. So what did that setup look like?
It's the hardest part about that setup. You're exactly right. And there's a reason those bucks get old by, doing that bedding and food pattern that we just described. A couple things we do to mitigate that. Number one is in this area, we actually do have an enclosed box blind. And that's kind of the first thing that helps us is, I don't think that they keep 100% of your scent in. I'm not naive to think that. You have to open windows. In this case, it was hot. I'm sweating. So we're doing everything to control scent, but that does take, a little bit of it away.
Right.
The other thing is, though, is you have to start looking, especially with mature bucks who like to move into the wind, you have to look for those, what I'd call like an off wind, right? So if he's moving from the south and I'm just a little bit further to the west of him, I've got a little bit of a drainage behind me. Is that going to be just enough to pull that wind just a little ways further to the west and not right in his line of travel? Sometimes you have to kind of try to split the atom a little bit and be very precise with, on the right day, if I think he's gonna be moving through here, I'm gonna take that risk.
Right. Yeah, man, that's really good. Two things I want to hit on right there. Number one, we often have guys who are like, yeah, no, I want to be in a tree stand. Like, I don't like the feel of a box blind. And it's like, they're like, I don't need to be that comfortable. I'm not trying to make you comfortable by putting the box blind there.
Yeah.
Like, this is playing into our hunting strategy by keeping down at least somewhat of that scent profile. Once that deer enters into a food source, boy, you can get busted really easy by sitting in a ladder stand on the edge of a food source. There's a lot of time for them to pick you off, not just him, but all the other deer that are in the plot probably before him. There's a lot of time there and a lot of eyeballs and a lot of noses to pick you off. So I think the enclosed blind is a really, really big deal. And then the just off wind, we got a drainage behind me. So we're thinking maybe we'll get some thermal pull. Maybe, we're kind of steering his movement with the edge of that drainage just a little bit. So it can be really, these really minute details really come into play here where, it's like, well, we need to stand 25 yards that way. Well, is it going to make that big of a difference? It might.
It might.
It very well may. That 25 yards may be what kept him from smelling you. So let's go into the hunt just a little bit here. You mentioned to your wife on the way out the door, hey, I think I could get a crack at this thing today. Did things play out like you thought?
The answer is yes, and I kind of chuckle because that never happens. This was just one of those hunts that happened exactly how it was supposed to happen, and then it's
Right.
so rare, but it did. And I think that if it doesn't always happen according to plan, but you have to have a plan and an expectation going into it, so that you do know how to kind of react, and hopefully things do line up. And in this case, they did.
Right. Yeah. So let's go into the actual specifics. So you get there. What time are you getting into the stand?
Oh gosh, I tried to get in early. That field it fills up with does pretty early on, way before you start to get bucks out on the field. And so I wanted to get in. I think I got in by like 3:30, because I wanted to get in well before those does start filing in. And you mentioned the box blind. That's another advantage there is you just get away with a little more when you've got all those eyes on you out in the field. So got in early, sweated it out. It was warm, but was able to get set up and just had to wait.
Yeah. Was there a specific weather condition that you felt like, other than, I'm guessing this was a south wind day?
Yeah, and it was even better. It's an extremely rare wind direction for us, but it was a little bit of an east southeast,
Okay.
I mean, we just don't often get that, but that was absolutely perfect because that makes that off wind even better for me.
Right. So just kind of takes it
Just a little
just
more.
off, yeah, just a little bit more off of where he's going to be. Okay.
Yeah.
Take me through the evening there. You get set up. What are you seeing early on?
Yep. Does and fawns, water hole, they're all over it right away. Most of the deer seem to go to the water hole first out of bedding and then out to the field to graze. So, is that a one-off? I don't know. I seem to see that on my cameras pretty often that they go to the water first and then out to the food. And that's kind of the order that they went. We had deer on the field, I think, starting at about 4:30 to, about 6:30 before we started seeing bucks come out too.
Okay. Had you done anything for maybe the shape of this food plot or anything like that to kind of pinch the deer down within bow range, or is this more of an open plot?
Yeah, I'll try to describe it. And I know it's hard because I've got a picture in my head and you're just looking at me, other people are just listening, but really what we have is kind of food plots kind of in two directions away from me that are larger. And then everything pinches down into about a 25-yard wide area right in front of me. And that's kind of what we wanted to create as the focal point. So we don't just have deer grazing at 150 yards and they're fun to look at, but we can't get that shot. So the field pinches down. We've got our water hole in that pinch down or that neck. And then we also have our mock scrape there. So it's really designed to kind of be the hub of activity from the larger areas around it.
Okay. And so you mentioned too, with this food plot, there's some brassica in the plot, and then there's some oats and peas and whatnot. Is that
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Are these planted in different locations? Those are planted obviously separate from each other. What's in between the two, I guess? Is there anything that's are you using food to steer those deer a little bit, or what does that look like?
So it's actually, if you think of the large field itself, we just cut it right in half
Okay.
and plant half and half. So it's not that it pulls from one side to the other because of the food sources that are different. It's more just the shape. Naturally, everything necks down, and then the water source there and the mock scrape is designed to make sure they get to that point.
Right. Right. So this buck then, does he pop out where you thought he was going to?
Came right out of the northwest corner of the field, just kind of how I described. He wanted to bet on those north facing ridges, and that's right where he was.
Okay.
Early season I think helps too because there are a lot of leaves on the trees, and I get into the blind quietly because we have a good access path. But he was probably only betted about 130 yards from me at the most. I mean, it was pretty tight quarters.
Wow. So you got to be real careful getting in.
You do, absolutely. And we pay a lot of attention to that wind direction coming in, making sure our access trails are cleared. We get in quietly, not bumping any deer. But this is one time when I think the foliage plays to your advantage too, because they don't have quite as good of visibility, as you're moving through, as they would in November when everything's bare.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Now, so he comes into the field. Does he start browsing right away, or is he heading for that water hole like you've seen with some of the others?
No, it was interesting. He didn't go for the water hole at all. He was heavy onto the food plot for quite a while, and really just you started to see that he just kind of wanted to do his own thing. The does were around, and if they got too close, he kind of push them off. Just wanted to browse, and I probably watched him for 25 minutes, just kind of mill around at about 85 yards. I didn't think he was going to get any closer. I was texting my buddy saying he's out here, but I don't think I'm going to get a shot.
Wow.
And so I, maybe we'll just watch him tonight. So yeah, that was about 20, 25 minutes of that. And I'm thinking, we still have plenty of time before dark, but he may not come through here until after dark. But here's where the luck comes into it, right? Because there's a lot of things that we design, but there's some luck too. From the south, a smaller buck came up to that water hole and then hit the mock scrape. And as soon as the mature buck saw that, it was like, all of a sudden a light switched, and he wasn't, territorial, and he wasn't charging, but he changed his posture. He stopped feeding, and he just slowly started working toward that other smaller deer that was over the mock scrape. Just, I think, kind of a territorial thing. All right, I'm going to go check him out. It's early season, kind of see where everybody's at the pecking order. And that was enough to pull him in my direction.
Wow. Okay. So he was just working towards that buck. Did he ever come and hit the mock scrape, or?
He did. Yeah. So as he pushed toward that mock scrape and water hole, you could see the other buck was like, this is not my fight. And so he kind of circled around. And then the large buck ended up walking right to the mock scrape at that point and worked it right after the small buck did. And so gave me the shot right at the mock scrape.
Wow. That's fantastic. That's one of the cool parts about mock scrapes on a food plot. Now, I've had probably a little harder time with some of the ones that are like a post in the field. What was this set on a tree, or did you have like the T-post, or what did that look like?
Yeah. So I've got a big old cedar branch off of a tree, probably 8 inches in diameter, up 6-8 feet, and then a post coming off of that, and then a mock scrape or a licking rope hanging down from that.
Okay.
Yeah. And pretty simple setup there, but they seem to like to rub their antlers on the cedar post in the fall. And then of course work the mock scrape all the time. But I think it's, the mock scrape is not why he came to me. It was the fact that there was another deer there, and that the field kind of necks down in a natural point where he'd want to come to. But once we got him inside of 40 yards, and I try to tell clients that it's not that the deer is going to come from 150 yards to hit your mock scrape, but now when we're talking about 5 yards, 10 yards being the difference between you getting the shot and not, or his attention being somewhere where you can get your bow drawn back, that's where it helped a lot in this case, because he did want to work the scrape that the other deer did, and that brought him in a couple extra yards. And now his focus is on that branch, and I'm able to draw back very comfortably, get a shot off, and he has no clue what happened.
Right. And I think too, like if you hadn't had that mock scrape there, that younger buck may not have come in to that exact location. He may not have worked it, may not have triggered that buck to think, you know what, I should go work that thing too, because I just saw him lay down some scent. I'm going to head over there as well. So let's talk about the shot then. This is where all of my hunts break down. I am so guilty, and I have been since I was young. I draw back the bow and I black out, and I wake up and the arrow's gone. And, I struggle with that buck fever. I always have. I attribute that to not shooting enough deer with a bow early on in my career. I passed on a lot of deer because I used to like to watch the Outdoor Channel and watch, I'm passing on young bucks when I'm 15 years old with a bow in my hand. It's like, you should have shot all of them, get the reps in,
Guilty of it.
Get the repetition, because in that moment of truth, being cool under pressure is so important. So let's talk about your shot placement. Were you happy with it?
Um, it was a good shot. It was not, well, we'll get to that. It was 23 yards. So from a standpoint of comfortability, well within my range, I felt really good. I knew that yardage ahead of time because we knew where that mock scrape was. I was able to range it. So felt good about my yardage. Felt good about the angle. He was a little quartering too, but not severe. And so made what I thought was a good shot. Got a full pass through and watched him go off. But he didn't react very typical. He kind of walked slowly. He stopped for a little while. He wasn't bleeding. I was able to watch him for 2 or 3 minutes in the field, out of bow range, but I just didn't quite know what to think. I started to doubt myself more as I didn't see him go down. Right. But what I did, you're talking about things going quickly. What I'm glad I did was after he was out of bow range from me, but he was still on the field, is I grabbed my phone right away and I videotaped him. And I wanted to just record everything that's happening so that I can go back and watch it again because things happen quickly. Did I miss something? Can I, pick up where the exit wound is? Something like that could clue me into the quality of the shot. So I videotaped him until he was out of range, and then right away sent that to a couple of buddies who, I trust and kind of what their opinion is on what we thought the shot was. And that helped me too. That gave me some confidence that the shot was better than maybe I had feared.
Yeah, yeah. So you obviously the hunt is over. I'm guessing it gets dark. You pull out of the blind, head back to camp or head back to your home or whatever it is, right? So you're thinking about the shot. How long are you thinking about giving this deer, given that you're not certain about the shot, but like your buddies are kind of, feeling pretty good about it?
Yeah, yeah. I felt very confident that if I waited till morning, there was with as much certainty as you can have without being 100% certain that he was dead. We felt like it was a good shot. It was good signs from what we looked at on the video. But early season can throw you some curveballs, and in this case, it was too hot to leave that deer till the morning. I mean, it was over 80 degrees, and it wasn't going to cool off till I think I don't even think it was going to get below 70 all night. So for here, that's too warm to leave a deer overnight.
Right.
So if this was November, I'd have just gone home and said, we'll pick it up in the morning. We'll find this deer dead. So because the weather's warm, now we kind of faced a choice. The only way I'm going to recover this meat is to go and try to find this deer tonight, but I risk if the shot was marginal, now we might push this deer. Do we ever recover it? Or are we just unnecessarily stressing this deer? I don't like to bump deer if they're wounded. We want, just kind of let things take their course. Or if we wait till the morning and we're sure we're going to find the deer, now we're going to have spoiled meat. So it's like I secure a trophy, but I lose the meat, and I don't like that either. So what we ended up deciding to do is I called a drone company.
Okay.
I have a friend that runs a drone company, and he said too, he's like, I think this deer's dead, but let's make sure so that when we go look for it tonight, that's the only way you're going to be 100% sure that you're not going to bump this deer tonight. So I had him come up, and it took him all of, I think, like 5 or 6 minutes because we had a pretty good idea of where he went. And even with the leaves on, we were able to find the heat signature in there, got it zoomed in and found that he had already expired. And likely it expired very quickly after the shot, but we got that final confirmation. And so then we were able to go get him, pull him out, process him, and didn't lose any meat.
Fantastic, man. That's incredible. And there's so much that goes into that decision of leaving a deer and how long do we leave him for? Not everybody's got a buddy down the road with a drone, but man, that's such a helpful tool. Even if we're not trying to find it, maybe we feel good about the shot. We feel good about where the deer went. We think we have an understanding, but just to confirm, like to be going in with the knowledge that he has expired, he's laying right here. Like that's huge for, do I need to push it a little bit further? What time did you recover the deer? Like how long after the shot was it?
Yeah, it was at least 3.5 hours later. I mean, we waited 2 hours before we even called the drone company, just to kind of just give some time to decompress and decide what we wanted to do. So we gave it plenty of time, as much time as we probably could have with the weather conditions.
Yeah, no, very good. Very good. All right. So you recover the deer. Let's talk about the buck a little bit then,
Yeah.
because man, I tell you, the pictures I saw of him prior to when you shot him, I was like, that's a good buck, really cool buck. Then I saw him in the pictures, I was like, wow, he's way more impressive when you've got your hands on him
Yeah.
after the fact. So let's talk about his rack just a little bit and kind of what you ended up with.
Yeah, it's funny how some deer, we joke they must have really, really thick velvet, because when they come out of velvet, you're like, where did like 40 inches of antler go? They look so much smaller, right?
That's right.
And then there's other deer that it seems like it kind of goes the other way, where once the velvet comes off and you really get a sense of what everything looks like, they are more impressive. And that was not saying that because I shot this deer, but that was really my experience on this one, is when I finally got to see him in person, velvet off, fully grown. It was more than I had expected that he might be. And especially his non-typical side, there was a lot more character and a few more points to it than what I thought there was. So it was a cool surprise, and getting to see him on the ground there was no ground shrinkage. It was a moment where it was more than I expected, for sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about the hunt then. Can you give me 2 or 3 things that maybe you feel like were key factors in this hunt?
Yeah. Yeah. I think number one is just understanding, having an idea and a plan of, where do I think these deer are bedded? Where are they going to come from? Any hunt that you're going to have, especially early season where you're on that bed to food pattern, I need to have that in my mind of, where are they coming from and where are they going? And
Yeah.
how do I get between those two things? And if you don't have that plan, I think you're just kind of taking a risk that you're going to bump deer, or you're going to be in the wrong position.
Right.
Obviously, deer can come from anywhere, but that's number one, is where are they coming from? Where are they going? How do I set up in between? So it helps when you have your own farm and you can set things up to kind of manipulate that, but you still have to consider things like I mentioned, with wind direction and where deer might select out of the bedding areas you have.
Right. Right.
Number two, I would say, is just having that focal point, that water hole, that mock scrape, something to really concentrate the movement. Going from a larger food source can be a challenge to get those deer to the specific spot where you want to shoot them in archery season. And so having something to really neck things down and draw deer in, I think, was the other big factor.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. So, moving from there, then, what are some things that you feel like this buck taught you? Because I feel like every buck teaches us something, right? Like every hunt, every buck, we learn something from that deer. What would you say this buck taught you?
Yeah, I think it goes back to individual personality types of bucks. And not that I didn't know that before, but each time you start to hunt deer and you see how they act throughout the season, you realize that there are only so many for certains with mature bucks. There's just some things that they're all going to do, but there's a lot of things that are going to be unique and different to all of them. And whether that's, their home range, whether that's if they're territorial or not, whether if it's, for preferred food sources, it just seems like you have to not live in absolutes when it comes to hunting one specific buck. You really have to get to know that deer and understand how they operate.
Yeah, no, that's huge. That is huge. All right. Wrapping it all up then, what does a guy like you do from now until you get that gun tag in your hand and are ready to go with it, assuming you're going to do some gun hunting there in Wisconsin? What do you do in the interim?
What a problem to have, huh?
Yeah, what a good problem.
Never works out this way. No, I was just thinking about that, and one of the things I want to do is I do want to push myself a little bit. We still have my dad to hunt our property, and I don't want to be bombing around on the property and messing things up for him. But I do want to do some more hunting and kind of challenge myself. So there's some public land nearby, and I'm gonna make it a goal to get out there and try to get a couple of does, try some different tactics, take some chances, because if I blow something up, it's okay, no harm, no foul. So I'm gonna do a little bit of that. And then hopefully just bank some time at home with the family, so that come gun season, I can get out there and spend more time than maybe I would have in other years when I was burning the candle at both ends through the rut in bow season.
Yeah, that's so good. So let's talk about it then. Your dad's still got a tag in his pocket. What do we have another one that's teed up and ready to go, or are we still kind of in a waiting game to let some of those early fall patterns begin to emerge?
Yeah, I think we're going to be more in a waiting game now. I wish we could just say we had 3 or 4 just lined up like that, but no, this was the most patternable buck that we wanted to go after. There's a couple good ones we've seen, but nothing that I would say, hey, I really have a good sense of where they're going to be next or what they're going to be doing. So kind of let the property change, leaves start to come off the trees. Your egg sources are going to change a lot in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll kind of see where the rest of our property really starts to come to life, some of those thicker areas and some of those more traditional ruddy type setups.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. Well, Tim, thanks so much for joining me today. Appreciate you coming on. Where can folks find you if they want to keep up with kind of what you're doing and see how the rest of your season shakes out?
Yeah, Instagram, Facebook, you can find me on there, both of those platforms, as well as, of course, look on the website. There's good content from everybody on the Whitetail Partners team, and then links to all of our pages individually if you want to get a hold of us.
Awesome. Good deal. Well, Tim, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Josh.